This evening we've got a special late Friday show with one of my very favorite guests. I am so pleased to welcome back Tiffany FitzHenry. Tiffany, how are you?
Doing good today. How are you doing?
I'm great, and I'm so pleased to have you back on the show. I think people are going to remember, Tiffany, you've been with us a couple of times. You've told us about your experience as a screenwriter. You're now an author, an activist. You're a conservative-minded mom who's just a fantastic role model and social media influencer. And you've just put out a series of basically revelations about the Hollywood darling George Clooney. And we're going to be talking about that a lot, but I wanted to just touch on a couple of points because the last show we did was about Jussie Smollett, and you were one of the first people to sniff out that hoax. There have been some recent developments, haven't there?
There have. The Gateway Pundit has just come out with some incredible revelations about conversations that took place involving Jussie Smollett, Kamala Harris, and Cory Booker about a legislation that they were trying to pass that needed public support. And this legislation was this anti-lynching bill. So he's being linked to them, and the pieces are being put together. The pieces were already there. Anyone who was, I would say, remotely paying attention, and especially I always say you can tell a lot by who tweets what and when. And I think not enough people pay attention to that. And in the case of this, as soon as everything happened, you had all of these mockingbirds, Sarah Gilbert, all of these people who are really part of this machine. They were right there with their lines and their whole party line. And then you had these almost identical tweets from Cory Booker and Kamala Harris about this subject, about using the exact same words. And it became pretty clear pretty quickly what this was. This was a hoax.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's amazing, Tiffany. Just earlier today, I had an interview with Joel Gilbert, the director of the brand new film that people are going to be able to get very soon at the TrayvonHoax.com. Joel has done amazing research tracking down Trayvon Martin's girlfriend, who had been substituted for a false witness at the trial, who during her deposition admitted that she was lying, but somehow I never heard about that. I don't think that made it to the mainstream news. And of course, George Zimmerman almost faced life in prison. They have the death penalty for murder in Florida, so he could have faced the death penalty. And certainly, he was the most hated man in America for some time after that. And he obviously could have been attacked by absolutely anyone who might have wanted to kill him for that. So it was interesting to me, not only from the standpoint of revealing that hoax, which may well have been the precursor to everything we've seen with Jussie Smollett. But, it's 2011. We didn't have the kind of foothold with independent news in the way that we have now. You're all over Twitter. You've got a podcast now. You're on Patreon. And I want to encourage people to visit your Patreon page. You've just started putting material there on Patreon, and it's a great way for people to support the work that you do by going to patreon.com/Tiffany FitzHenry. And, this is such a powerful way to support independent news. This is the entire support method for Crowdsource the Truth through Patreon and Subscribestar. And I know, Tiffany, some people have an issue with the company Patreon, some choices that they made in 2018. But what I'm getting at is this notion of viewer-sponsored news sources. It's the way to go. We don't want these huge companies, these huge Hollywood types, whoever it might be, to have this undue financial influence over the news.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, there's no corporate anything behind somebody like me. I say whatever I want to say. I report on whatever I feel is important, and I dig into these things. And when you start to develop a platform and you start to develop a reputation for being accurate, talking about things that people are interested in, there's a lot of power behind that, but there really is no money behind that. And it's like, I want to be able to build a studio. I want to be able to build a streaming service. I want to be able to create a completely counter answer to Hollywood, and then decentralize all that power that comes to me out to other artists. And the way that I do that is, well, there, you know what I mean, without taking any money from, different types of entities who would love to get me on the payroll.
Right.
I won't do that. I want to do it through the people.
Yeah.
So that it's truly real and I'm completely untethered as I am.
Yeah, because when we look at people like George Clooney, even Barack Obama, he's just been given a huge book deal. He's got some kind of crazy deal with Netflix. I mean, we don't need to do too much thinking to know who is behind these kind of deals and how this money is having influence over what these people say. Sometimes it's not even a direct ask. I've spoken about this a couple times on the show, how I have a friend in the publishing business who told me, oh yeah, our pharmaceutical advertisers don't have any influence over the editorial content of our medical journal, but I asked him to think about how there might be no editorial content if they lost that funding from the pharmaceutical companies. So it's important that we distribute this funding among a large group of viewers. Before we get into the George Clooney stuff, the other thing I just wanted to talk about that's peripherally related to Hollywood. I don't know that Ed Buck is in the entertainment industry per se, but he does live in West Hollywood, which probably does give him a good amount of influence over a lot of media people. Multiple friends of mine were living in West Hollywood, and there are a lot of good restaurants over there. But Ed Buck, of course, has been arrested. I don't know what this 314 over his head is. He might like pie. He's not looking too well in the jail cell there with the bulletproof vest. I found it strange, Tiffany, that the New York Times described Ed Buck as a small-time Democratic donor. I've always heard of him as a mega donor. Yeah,
and so have I. And I went and looked, there are websites where you can see what donations, this is all public record. And so I started, and I listed what I could find, and it's extensive. It's super PACs. It's, pretty much all of the big time left-wing candidates over the last 5-10 years. He's right there. So it's not, I would not say he's a small-time donor at all.
Yeah. And I mean, irrespective of what he's donating to who, there's 3 guys who have crystal meth overdoses at his house. He seems to have a propensity to hire male prostitutes and then personally inject them with crystal meth. It's one of the most bizarre stories. And then we got the pictures with Adam Schiff and Hillary Clinton hanging out and smiling with these people. The guy's a drug dealer and essentially a murderer, but that's fine. He's a...
And look, if this was 15 years ago or 10 years ago, this story alone would be dominating headlines for a week.
Right.
It's so sensational. It's the kind of thing that we used to talk about for a week. It is just, the news cycle has so sped up, and all of the things that we hear about and all of the things we're being told about, it's so easy for us to breeze over them and not sit there and think, well, what does this really mean? What are we looking at here? It's like with the revelation that yesterday a second person related to Kevin Spacey, someone who he's actively in a lawsuit with right now, just died. The plaintiff died. This is like not even a blip on people's radar.
Yeah.
And yet it's absolute and utter bombshell news.
Right.
And so we're so inundated with information. It's really important to know the important things that are going on and to know what we're looking at. And this, I don't quite know what we're looking at, but to me it looks pretty desperate.
Yeah. Well, and Kevin Spacey, famously friends with the Clintons. He was on Jeffrey Epstein's jet. Now somebody who's suing him for sexual assault or sexual something, dead. That's probably a coincidence. There's so many other strange deaths related to all these people that we could get into. But let's get down to talking about George Clooney. Everyone is really interested in the extensive research that you've done and you've been publishing on TiffanyFitzHenry.com and on your Twitter feed here. What can you tell us about this, Tiffany?
You know, when you brought up Epstein and when that most recent trove of court documents became unsealed and there was a excerpt that involved Clooney, it really got me to digging because I thought, well, if he's getting sexual favors from international sex traffickers in bathrooms at events, who is this guy? Everybody knows, a lot of people know that I know a lot about the sort of deep state Hollywood marriage as it pertains to Pentagon CIA involvement in movies. And I already knew, because I have all this information just memorized, how many of his movies involved not only, you know, Pentagon involvement, but involved CIA, direct CIA involvement. And it was pretty much almost all of them. So I thought it's time to really dig into, and particularly too, because his tequila brand just sold for $1 billion in 2017.
That's crazy, right?
Tequila brand he started in 2015, just saying.
Let's talk about that for a second, because I found that super interesting. Now, so this is Casamigos tequila, right? It's not like he invented some new computer thing that does something that nobody could ever do before. It's booze. There's tons of booze that you could get from anywhere. What about this tequila makes it worth $1 billion in 3 years? It seems absurd.
I argue it's what him and Randy Gerber and these people who are involved in this company have been doing for the powers that be that make it worth $1 billion. That's what, you know, I'm gonna do a follow-up piece. I'm actually almost done with it now, which I didn't plan on doing at all. I thought, you know, in what we'll get into with the first piece, I thought, okay, point proven. You know what I mean? But then it's actually even deeper. And what does it mean to work for these elite powers? What does that really mean? What does that look like? And I think we have to take all these things apart. We have to take this apart piece by piece and expose what this is, because this is all fake. All of this stuff is the fake world that's been built up around us. It's the Matrix. And what we want is we want real things. That's why people, you know, like you mentioned Patreon, it's like you want to support the things that you want. And we're de facto supporting all of these things that we don't even want. All of these elevated celebrities and all of this manufactured stuff. So then we have this manufactured world where the elite take private jets and lecture us about climate change. It's disgusting. Yeah. It's a joke. So we have to take it all apart in order to rebuild what we want. That's kind of why I'm doing a second part on him, because he's an absolute case study. Yeah. Really, for the record.
And when you say that the $1 billion sale of Casamigos tequila brand to Diageo, I think the largest liquor company in the world, for $1 billion is because of what George Clooney is doing for the deep state, you're suggesting that this is potentially, possibly, we don't have evidence to support this, but I tend to agree with this speculation that this could be a deal that's put together specifically to funnel money to George Clooney. And frankly, from the standpoint of marketing a tequila, you put George Clooney's face on it, you get it into every high-end bar, and people are going to drink it. There's really probably not too much about one tequila brand that makes it worth $1 billion over another, particularly when you consider there are going to be family-based brands from Mexico that have existed for hundreds of years, that have refined their recipes, have experts in making tequila. This is just something they threw together and found a way to get $1 billion to George Clooney.
Yeah. Kind of, yes, exactly. Well, and also noteworthy, the guy who helped them start it in 2015 in the UK, they started it out of London, was the former CEO of Diageo. Wow. So isn't that interesting?
That is.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And then they, you know, so it's weird that it's like this circle and cycle of people. And I'll pull up that name for you. This is all gonna be in my second dive, my part 2. And you know, the law firm that did the deal is the same law firm that Amal Clooney was working for when she was defending Enron. All just so cozy.
I didn't know she defended Enron. Oh my God.
Yeah. You know, isn't it so, like, And so it's all this one hand washing the other. It's deeper than what people think, but guess what? We have the internet now. So it's also, you only have to have an internet connection to figure these things out. It's not brain surgery.
Well, you need an internet connection and a Tiffany FitzHenry to figure this out. But it's good that people have the option to be able to listen to independent sources like you and to keep you free of the type of economic influence that a billion-dollar deal with Diageo might sway what you say. Now, Amal Clooney was also an attorney for WikiLeaks, and I know that she left under some circumstance that I can't recall right now, but it seemed to me, and again, this is my opinion based on speculation, that she might have been in there to keep an eye on WikiLeaks, not necessarily to actually help WikiLeaks.
That was my thought too. A lot of people have asked me about that, and they've asked me my opinion because they know that I cite WikiLeaks all the time. Whenever I want to search anything, it's kind of my first stop, because it's honestly such an incredible trove that we have. And so it's kind of weird, right, that these two things are together. But in another sense, this is kind of what you would do if you wanted to keep tabs on something, is you would put one of your people in there.
Yeah.
And so she, I think, probably was serving that function.
All right. So what else have we learned about George Clooney? Syriana was not just a cool movie where he got his fingernails pulled out. The CIA was all in there, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, all of his movies up through The Men Who Stare at Goats were what I consider to be his audition. His I know how this works. He was auditioning to be a major player. And a major player, especially like someone like him who can be an agent of influence, he knows exactly how the game is played. And the game is, so you see, people have been using movies and TV to influence our thinking, to influence our point of reference of history, to make all these kids take to the street because they think the planet is dying. Do you know what I mean? Movies and TV and celebrities have been used to do all of this stuff for a very, very long time. So you've got people like George Clooney who kind of want to get in there and be a top dog in this system. And his movies, from Syriana, Good Night and Good Luck, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, to The Men Who Stare at Goats, previous to that, he was already making government movies. But this was this moment in history. These 4 movies for me were like his audition for the CIA to really become a player in this global system. And it's not an accident where he is today. It's because of this trajectory that he laid out.
Yeah, and you put up a tweet talking about the sheer number of WikiLeaks references to George Clooney in the global, what was the release?
Yeah, the Global Intelligence Files is Stratfor. It's an intelligence publisher. Right. There's 276 emails mentioning George Clooney directly. So, for example, they're just completely keeping tabs on him. And Stratfor is employed by Boeing and Lockheed Martin, and it's part of this global network of sort of money laundering, influence peddling, and global narrative shaping. It's just part of this machine. And so what are they doing keeping tabs on George Clooney? Well, he's also part of this machine. He's taking literally money from Boeing and Lockheed Martin for his NGOs. How do you have an NGO that's, trying to purportedly prevent war in Africa, that is actually completely made by the Centers for American Progress and Boeing and Lockheed Martin? It's all just such a sham, and it's created chaos in our world for long enough.
Yeah. Well, Stratfor is one of these sort of private CIA type firms, a private intelligence firm. I kind of fundamentally object to these things because where does it end? We've got Blackwater, and that's called, like, what is that called now? Academy. Why do we have, a bigger budget for military and intelligence than any other country in the world, and then we need to outsource this stuff to other companies? Bill Binney had said that he felt that the outsourcing of this type of government work to private contractors was the biggest problem that we faced, because obviously if you're getting millions of dollars from the government, you don't want to solve the problem necessarily that you're hired to solve. You want to mitigate it and keep that contract going year over year.
This, by the way, what you're experiencing on my website,
yeah,
my website has been under constant attack.
Oh, and the second you mentioned it, it started to behave. That's interesting. But people can go to Tiffany. People can go to TiffanyFitzHenry.com. You can order these onesies. This is like baby clothing. What do we got here?
No, those are tank tops. They look like onesies. They're like women's tank tops, and those ones say New Earth Ambassador. Because I'm talking about we need to get rid of all this fake world and create a new Earth that is, what we're all doing to, spreading this truth to get rid of all these shills and all of this illusion. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I've got a lot of cool t-shirts, all stuff that I'm trying to help subsidize. Like, for example, I just had to spend a small fortune on my website because it's being attacked constantly. I have to have some crazy people like, I can't comment on your website. I'm like, comments had to go because my firewall is so high and I have everything, my security set so high because I'm just under constant attack. So it's like, for people to understand, and I'm demonetized like everywhere. So for people to understand what people like me go through, once you start to have a lot of people listening and a lot of people looking to your content, the first thing they do is completely demonetized off of YouTube. I got kicked off Instagram for no reason. This is the modern day warfare that we're in. Right. So, you have these t-shirts. I have a few other things. I have my Patreon to help me be able to continue to do what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
Because I can't just spend thousands of dollars every month and all my time and try to also support my family. Do you know what I mean?
I do. Believe me, I do. And then there's a lot of people who like to come in and say, oh, this information needs to be free. But certainly the information that CNN and Fox News and the New York Times and the Washington Post are bringing to people, that's not free. That's funded by billionaires, people who are very probably friends with people like George Clooney and Harvey Weinstein. So if people want to hear the counterpoint to the points, the fake points that are being raised by the mainstream news, it is very important that they support independent journalists like yourself. Now, so this is what I was thinking about. The global intelligence files were Stratfor documents that were leaked by WikiLeaks, right?
Right. So it's a trove of emails that WikiLeaks posted, and I think that they go for about 5 or 6 years span in the early 2000s to the mid 2000s or so. And it's emails within this company, and you can clearly see they're keeping tabs on Clooney, they're commenting, they're absolutely tracking him. A lot of people don't even know about this, the sex trial that Clooney was a witness in.
What? I didn't know about that. Right now. What is that?
So this just went right over our heads. This is another one that just went right over our heads. This was in 2010. So the former prime minister of Italy, Berlusconi, I think, I don't know how exactly to say his name, Silvio is his first name, Berlusconi. He was on trial for rape of a minor that happened at one of these parties.
The prime minister of Italy?
The former prime minister.
That's amazing. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. And this was child rape. And this was one of his supposed so-called bunga bunga parties. This all came out in the trial that George Clooney was at. So George Clooney was called. Yeah, he was called as a witness. And shortly after this, he got his Council on Foreign Relations sort of coronation.
Oh, my God.
As its lifetime membership was sort of maybe, in part some sort of reward for doing the things that these people do, which is go to underage sex parties and compromise yourself so that you can be controlled, so that you can have that influence. I mean, these are things we're just seeing over and over and over, to the point where it's like we have to know what we're looking at. exactly at this point.
Wow. And the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations, is not something that I heard very much about at all in Los Angeles or in Hollywood, but I do hear a lot about it here in New York and in Washington, D.C. This is essentially one of these sort of front organizations. This is the CIA, the Council on Foreign Relations, right? I mean, they have so much influence in this.
They have influence over our foreign policy. So we've got our State Department taking its cues from the Council on Foreign Relations, which is a completely unelected, completely ungovernment checked and balanced body that functions in a way that influences our foreign policy. And we can't vote these people out of office. They're unelected.
Right.
It's unconstitutional, is what it is.
Now, the other thing that's interesting, Tiffany, is that we're just looking at this thing, George Clooney. I guess it's like some kind of super club where you need to be invited by somebody who's already in there. And his two sponsors for that invitation were Nick Kristof from the New York Times, who I've heard his name but don't know that much about him, and Charlie Rose. It's interesting to note, of course, that Charlie Rose just today was again accused of sexual assault by his former makeup artist, and the talk show was a sexual hunting ground, according to the makeup artist.
And Charlie Rose would go skinny dipping at George Clooney's Italian villa. This is going to be in my second George Clooney installment. And he was all over the Epstein book, the Black Book. He was all over the Epstein flight logs. This is how it works. These are what the elite do. These circles that they travel in, these things that they do, and then they'll nominate each other for this. They'll donate to each other's charities. It's all this washing machine, and it's peddling influence, and it makes us have a fake world where everything is not real. All these people are all owned. He's owned. He's not a journalist. He's a joke.
Yeah.
You know, he's skinny dipping in George Clooney's Italian villa. Great. People can have fun, and that's fun and whatever. But when you have all of this debauchery and you have all of these degenerates who are sexually harassing people, Harvey Weinstein and him shared a former assistant. I mean, he's wrapped, Charlie Rose, so people know, is wrapped up in Weinstein, Epstein. He's wrapped up in Clooney. He nominated Clooney for Council on Foreign Relations. We're really seeing, Jason, we're seeing behind the veil in a way that we never, ever have before. And it's really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's surprising because, you know, Charlie Rose, he's got that nice warm sound on the microphone in the dark studio, and he's always interviewing important people, and it's like, oh, Charlie Rose. It's one of those institutions that you just grow up and it's like, oh, of course, Charlie Rose, that's a big deal. And now we're really seeing what's really behind this. The other thing with George Clooney was this whole thing with Darfur. It's always interesting, like, I mean, let's face it, George Clooney, he's basically a good-looking guy who can talk and remember lines. Why do we care what George Clooney thinks about Darfur or whatever?
I think we started to get a real dose of that in the lead up to the 2016 election. Everybody was like, shut up. Why do we care what you think? And all of these celebrities telling us about what we should care about politically and about how we should feel about everything politically. We really started to, for the first time, get a sense of that, what you just said. Why should we care what you think?
Right. You're
just an actor. You know what I mean? Like, what does that even mean? But these people are, listen, you know, it's like you were saying about Charlie Rose having the right voice and having the right air about him. You know, I'm a very good screenwriter. They wanted to have me and have my talent and have me be owned and have me write their crap for them. Right. Because I'm really good at writing movies and TV shows. People like my blogs. They like my tweets. You should read my scripts. Like, this to me is like, I crank these things out over breakfast while I'm making breakfast for my kids. Because it's like, it's not even what I do best. Do you know what I'm saying? But what it is you take these people like a George Clooney who has this set of skills, which lots of people have, you know, and you elevate him and you systematically compromise, control, and elevate. And this is literally what we're looking at. So when he finally won this Oscar for Syriana, it was in 2006, and he'd, just gone right along right after that. He gave this big endorsement to Barack Obama at that point, which he was only then a one-time senator, saying that this guy needs to be president before they elect 2 years before any of that happened. It's all this system of, because, he's already owned. And so let's help our other guys, help these owned and installed people rise in the ranks. It's just grotesque.
Yeah.
It's really just so fake and so false.
The other thing, Tiffany, is that, we've all become so inundated with, video content, motion picture entertainment, etc. There is, to some extent, a blurring of the lines of what you remember from history and what you remember from a movie, something that I'm experiencing quite a lot when I speak to Larry Nichols and some of the other guests that I have on. If you search for Barry Seal, prior to the movie American Made, you got a lot of, it's weird. Maybe Google's listening right now. It seems to me anytime I search for Barry Seal, I'm getting mostly pictures of Tom Cruise, and there are a few mixed in here. But certainly the facts in that movie, or I should say the fiction portrayed in that Barry Seal movie, they danced around a lot of the more troubling aspects of what Barry Seal was up to at the behest of the CIA. And it's really interesting how many people will see the Tom Cruise movie and think they know everything about that incident.
Well, and that's why George Clooney won his second Academy Award as a producer of Argo, so that they could rewrite the narrative.
I didn't know he was the producer of Argo.
Yes, he was. And Argo, we know, was made in conjunction with the CIA. That's the CIA's narrative of events.
Right.
And you're exactly right. These movies are used to grab a hold. This is why they make movies about things that, it's like Charlie Wilson's War, making that movie about, arming the Mogadishu and all of that. It's something that they want. Mujahideen, I'm sorry.
Right.
It's something that they want to control your thinking around. They want to control your thinking around what the CIA's involvement was. And so they go ahead and make a movie about it, and then that becomes the textbook. That becomes our history book.
Right.
It becomes what we think happened. There's this great quote that I have that one of the people responsible, there's been a few people over the years responsible as the sort of head of the entertainment liaison office. Chase Brandon was the CIA head of the Hollywood entertainment liaison office. These are official positions, by the way. And Phil Strub, for 30 years, was over the Department of Defense, liaisoning with Hollywood. Wow. And there was a movie that these filmmakers wanted to make, but they went for the help of the Pentagon to make this movie. And because they called for aircraft carriers and all this stuff. Well, when you get into bed with the government to make a movie, they'll give you all of this stuff, but they have to have complete control over the script. So like every single Marvel movie, Department of Defense has complete control over the entire script.
Wow.
So just so everyone knows that.
Why Marvel? That's all fictional stuff. That's not historic or military stuff. Why do they control Marvel?
Your perspective. It's shaping it's who's the enemy. Oh, well, let's make Russia the enemy. Well, it's a Russian guy. It's this, it's that. I mean, it is programming is what it's doing, and it's programming the American mind. But there was a movie called Countermeasures that these filmmakers wanted to make, and Phil Strub famously said, we're not going to support this movie because there's no need to remind the American people about the Iran-Contra affair. And it was, we've already sealed that narrative in the minds of the American people with the propaganda that we've created around that. We're not going to go back there. And that movie never got made. So these are the boys with all the toys. And if you want to make a movie that talks about what they're doing, you're going to need to get their permission. And then they're going to tell you how to talk about it. This has been our life for 100 years. This has been our life for 100 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this is a letter to Bruce Hendricks, the Senior Vice President of Motion Picture Production at the Walt Disney Company. He says, Mr. Hendricks, as you know, We've reviewed the April 12th, 1993 version of Countermeasures. The areas of controversy are quite substantial. The script conveys a distinctly inaccurate and unpleasant way of life in the Navy, particularly for women. Nearly all the crew members show little respect for their jobs, themselves, their shipmates. It appears that only major revisions to the script would alter this depiction, and we assume that you would be unable to accommodate this drastic a change. This guy's not that good of a writer. For the reason we've described our concerns here enclosed only in general terms. If you believe that it's possible to resolve these difficulties, we would certainly be willing to provide further information. This is a Hollywood letter that says no.
This says no. We're not going to help you make this movie. And here's the thing, filmmakers, Marvel has made all of their movies in conjunction with the Pentagon, and they get access, they get equipment, they get unprecedented levels of bolstering to their filmmaking that other filmmakers just can't get. And there have been so many instances, you know, the CIA and the Pentagon, they're all supposed to be pricing things fairly. There's supposed to be an actual give and take. There's supposed to be no real advantage to having the military help you if you could have an outside company who, you know, there should be outside military companies that where people collect, you know, trucks and all kinds of military kit to rent to productions. Right. They can't even hold a candle, obviously, because they don't have access to the installations as well. You can't just go shoot at Camp Pendleton. You know, Katy Perry made her video there.
Whoa.
It was, Katy Perry's, the video where she joins the Marines. We paid for that. And it has over 1 billion views on YouTube. But, you know, of course, we didn't get any of it. Has over 1 billion views on YouTube. Google, Part of Me, I think maybe it's called.
I see.
Part of Me.
Yes.
Where she breaks up with a boyfriend and she joins that was shot over a few days at Camp Pendleton using real U.S. military, real Marines. That's your tax dollars at work making this movie. Hold on, I have to plug my computer in.
Sure, no problem. Doesn't she look remarkably like Demi Moore in G.I. Jane right here in this picture? It's kind of the same.
Yeah, she does.
Let's look at G.I. Jane and see. Because that was about a woman joining the Navy SEALs. Do we know, are women allowed to join the Navy SEALs, or was that a fiction?
I don't know, but I can see if G.I. Jane was supported by the Department of Defense. Do you want to see?
Yeah, I'm sure it was, but it would be worth checking out. Well, perhaps I remembered that incorrectly, because when I look at the posters, sometimes they change these posters after the fact. Maybe this is the video poster. I remember the theatrical poster looked kind of different, but I can't seem to find the G.I. Jane movie poster.
I think that this movie was supported by the Pentagon, but I have to look into it a little further.
So Tiffany, what do you think the implications are that we've got Stratfor writing about George Clooney? The emails are released by WikiLeaks, and I wonder what the time frame is, you know, when Amal Clooney became the WikiLeaks lawyer. Is she there is that damage control? It certainly seems like it could be.
That would be a good explanation. That would be a really good explanation for why she's there. Yeah. I'm not sure the time frame. That's also something really great to look into. Right. What was that time frame? Because that would tell us a little bit more, you know, in terms of what was that? Why was she involved?
Yeah. And
I mean, you don't go from defending Enron to defending Julian Assange. I mean, that's kind of a leap for me.
It's also important to mention that if she was on the defense team for, she's defending Enron? Oh, because Mueller was prosecuting Enron.
Yep. So she was working for a law firm at the time, the law firm that later did the Casamigos sale, $1 billion sale. And this law firm was defending Enron.
Oh, wow. And here's the Huffington Post saying she's not a saint. That's interesting, because that's a pretty lefty-style deal. Amal Clooney is not a saint. Her appearance at the Golden Globes alongside her trophy husband, George Clooney, caused a buzz. Wow, that's an article that people can dig into from 2015. I found it strange when they got married because I remember forever George Clooney was like the consummate bachelor, never going to get married. There was something with one of his girlfriends who was involved in some kind of drug, sex, something or other.
Yeah, he in 2010, I believe, his girlfriend at the time, I can never say her name, Elizabetta Canales or something. She was mixed up in, she was implicated in a trial about, again, these same subject matters. It was high price call girls, prostitution ring, drug and prostitution ring.
Wow.
And
It's
so,
amazing.
yeah, that was at the time when she was his girlfriend, I believe. Yeah.
Tiffany, people in the chat are asking, how does the CIA recruit somebody like George Clooney? Is it just as simple as coming to one of these Hollywood parties with some fancy person who... Look, I know how people approached me at Hollywood parties, and they don't walk up to you right away and say, hey, do you want to do this massively questionable, terrible thing? They sort of baby step it, right? They say, hey, do you want to do this little thing? And if you say no, you're not going to the next thing.
Exactly. I was put in a position where I was being made to just say the words to executives at ABC, I'm willing to do anything. My reps were insisting that that these executives were waiting to hear me say the words, I'm willing to do anything. And they were upset with me because I wasn't saying that, and I wasn't going to say that. And so that's almost like step one. And then you listen, you pass that step, they take you to meet Harvey Weinstein. It's a series of steps. So someone like George Clooney, who it could be argued quite easily knows how all this works,
right,
was actually, being very proactive about it. Because what intelligence agencies like the CIA want is they want to own assets. They want to have assets. They want to have people on the ground who can be agents of influence. So if you're giving off the vibe where you're, this is partly why we had all these strange, crazy texts or tweets, right, of all of this really sick, dark stuff from people like James Gunn.
Right.
They're signaling. They're sending signals to the powers that be. Hey, I'm one of you. I'm compromised. I'm compromisable. You can own me. That's fine. You can give me that big directing role. You can give me that big starring role. Because all the influence that I get from becoming the director of Guardians of the Galaxy, you can own that influence. I'll tell people who to vote for. Just tell me what to say. That's how this works. It's not that complicated. And, the CIA has a list of movies they would love for people like me to write. I could wake up tomorrow morning and go, you know what? I want to play the game. I know exactly what movies to write. I know exactly how to write them. And I know exactly who to send them to. And guess what? They want that stuff made. They want it made so bad. And there's a lot of people who can act. There's not a lot of people who can probably write a great script. I mean, I think that's a much more refined skill.
Absolutely.
It's a smaller
No
niche
doubt.
of people.
Writing,
just a smaller...
just so that you're not tooting your own horn, writing is one of the most difficult aspects of the filmmaking process because you start with nothing and you're creating something. I can't write a script, but when I see a script, I know what we need to do with the camera to make it all happen. So there's nothing happening without the writer.
Well, and here's the thing. It's and I don't mean to toot my own horn at all. It's imperative to say that every single meaningful action that's ever been brought in Hollywood over the last 80 years has been brought by the writers.
You mean an action against the mainstream, like the McCarthyism and all that first started with the writers, that movie Trumbo?
Actions being like the Writers Guild coming together, the writers' strike, and every time things have been, an action against the studios, it's been the writers. Because at the end of the day, you're the manufacturer of the product. And everyone works together to make a movie, but you have nothing if you don't have a script. So
yes.
Hollywood kind of knows that. And they actually treat the writers the worst. Right now, there's so much going on right now with that. The writers have all fired their agents over the last 6 months. The Writers Guild and the big 5 agents have been locking horns. over the poor treatment of the writers. And it's part of how Hollywood has forsaken everything and everyone. Like the theater owners, they're just absolutely at their wits' end right now. They've just been so controlled in this mob system, and they've been squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. It's every part of it is absolutely ready to just snap.
Yeah. There's a lot of weird things about the way Hollywood works in terms of, monopolies and things like that. There have been many stories, even friends of mine have suffered from this, where the big studios exert their influence over movie theaters by, pushing out smaller films and just saying, well, if you, like Disney right now, can basically block any movie from getting distributed that they don't like by simply telling a theater, if you run that movie, you're not getting any Star Wars movies, you're not getting any Marvel movies, you're not getting any Disney cartoons, and the movie theater will drop any movie at all. We've got some people in the comments, Tiffany, asking us, Span Man is talking about George Clooney's mother, and it's Rosemary Clooney, is that her?
That's his aunt. That's his
aunt.
Father Nick Clooney's sister, Rosemary Clooney. So in the article, I go into his family, and, there are multiple people who broke into entertainment, which is supposedly so hard to do. Multiple people within his own family. 2 of his aunts, multiple cousins, were all had major inroads into entertainment. And so that's, Rosemary Clooney, the famous actress and singer, was his aunt.
Right. And of course, talent may run in the family. I certainly observed that nepotism is huge in Hollywood. It was a major disadvantage to not have your father be an entertainment lawyer or a cinematographer or a producer or an agent or something like that. I'm not going to name names, but on the big movies that I was on, all the people in the big positions were like that. Had somebody who, pictures of them when they were kids on set and things like this. So any kind of industry like that where it's so tightly kept in the family, I mean, it's, again, there's plausible deniability there because there are a lot of industries where it's passed down from one family to the next, and talent is certainly something that would be passed down in a family. George Clooney is a handsome guy. The looks are, passed down through the family. So, again, I mean, we can't necessarily point to any of these things as conclusive evidence, but they are interesting factors.
Yeah, it's interesting. Honestly, I think it goes even deeper than that. I think that there are these families who, you can call it a conspiracy or whatever, but there are sort of these bloodline families who have a propensity to, they have a lot of this abuse, this trauma-based mind control, this, you talk about like the Barrymore family and all of the connections to military intelligence. There are connections to military in George Clooney's family through his father, and I haven't dug beyond that, but, there's also a epigenetics, I will call it, of being able to be controlled. And there's trauma-based mind control that, look at these Disney stars, right? These kids.
Right.
Trauma-based mind control is one of the ways that people are controlled. This is part of what the CIA studied. This is part of what came over from Project Paperclip to be part of our system in Hollywood particularly. And part of how you do that is fracture the mind. Well, those things are passed down generation to generation. They've already, completely proven that trauma becomes carried genetically, epigenetics passes down. So part of the reason I think too of this nepotism and this generational, lineage, particularly in Hollywood, is because when you're above the line in Hollywood and you become a famous actor, producer, director, you have a lot of influence, and that influence is going to be owned if you are, a trauma-based, survivor generationally. Jay-Z talks about this in one of his songs. He literally pretty much lays out what I just said about the generational trauma. I can't remember the name of the song.
Wow. That's
But
interesting.
I don't think it's a conspiracy theory anymore. I really don't.
Oh, I agree. I think it's a conspiracy. I was going to say, have you noticed, maybe you haven't, I don't know how much time you spend on set as a writer, but it seems to me that on big movies, the craft services table is controlled by guys with, heavy sounding Brooklyn accents and names like Tony and stuff like that. I love Italian people and have tons of Italian friends, but I think the mob has got some influence over the trucking, the food service on set and things like this. So it's a very
Well,
controlled environment.
you mentioned the theater owners, and
Yeah,
like you mentioned, Harvey Weinstein. Everything within Hollywood has been run like a mob system.
yeah,
The Teamsters, I
yeah,
mean, it's all, there is no difference between what goes on from a power perspective all through Hollywood and the way a mob family is run. There is
right,
absolutely no difference.
yeah. And
He could blackball somebody
absolutely,
and
and
nobody
he
would
has.
hire them.
Yeah,
Yeah, oh, and that was part of his function.
yeah.
You're on board or you're not.
And when it comes to Harvey Weinstein, I wonder if the black ball or the white balls are what you got to worry about, because this guy is disgusting. We'll see if he gets his comeuppance pretty soon. Tiffany, some people in the comments are asking, what do you think they can do as individuals?
Spread this information, break the illusion, break the spell. More money has been spent to cast a spell on us as Americans, more resources, because at the end of the day, it's going to come down to us. This sort of global order that has created all our wars, that has done all of this, raping and pillaging and, crazy mind control stuff. It all kind of is allowed to exist not because the people living in huts in Ethiopia consent to it, it's because we as Americans are consenting to it.
Right.
It's a sad state to say, but we have, as Americans, an incredible amount of global power, so much more than we realize. And we're under a spell. And so much money and so many resources have been put into casting that spell. And that's the spell I'm trying to break. And what you can do as people and as individuals, share this information, wake the others. Because if none of this stuff works, we have just crossed over that Rubicon where we can't be controlled by any of these means or methods. Everything that's been set up to keep this world order in place completely collapses. There's this amazing quote that a journalist who I love said, and she said something to the effect of, for propaganda to work, it has to be invisible. That is the only one thing it has to be. Once you see it,
Right.
it 100% fully and completely ceases to work. So the article that I did on Ellen recently, I have heard from thousands and thousands and thousands of people. That article was read over 1 million times. People said, I sent this to everyone in my family. Everyone's freaking out. No one's watching Ellen anymore. No one will ever look at her the same. That's a powerful thing.
Yes.
That's a powerful thing because she's used to keep this spell on people. There she is, corresponding with the State Department about selling agendas and selling narratives. And yet she's like being Ellen, she's super unthreatening. And she's like, oh, look at this Amazon Alexa. Isn't this cute? Ha ha ha. That's all doing something to the people in America, but now it's not going to everyone who's woken up. That's powerful. So
Yeah.
that's what you can do, is to wake the others. Wake the others. Share the information. And once people see it and once people know, these celebrities are useless. They're literally useless.
Yeah. It's one of those
And they're
things.
being things right now. And then
Yeah.
they become useless.
Think about it like this, Tiffany. I've got some friends who, they quit smoking. Actually, my ex-wife quit smoking, and then she just hated cigarettes after that. Couldn't be around them. It's almost like once you snap out of it and you realize, how could I ever fallen for that? It's a revelation. I mean, you mentioned Ellen DeGeneres. How bizarre is it that the one eyewitness that's trotted out in front of American audiences from the Las Vegas shooting, this guy Jesus Campos, What the hell is he doing on the Ellen show? I mean, this is like where, you know, somebody goes when they release, this is where Katy Perry goes when she releases her new album. This is hardly a hard-hitting news show, and it wasn't even like Jesus Campos was doing his rounds interviewing everywhere. It was just Ellen. Everybody noticed after this that there was an Ellen DeGeneres slot machine at MGM hotels. So it is really astounding how interconnected all of these things are. I think, you know, another thing, Tiffany, that people can do is you can stop going to the movies if you know, have nothing else to do. Instead of going to the movies, maybe hang out with your kids or your friends, or go outside, do some exercise, or tune in to a podcast from Tiffany FitzHenry on patreon.com/Tiffany FitzHenry, or you could watch Crowdsource the Truth on patreon.com/Crowdsource the Truth. And I know that sounds like a pitch, and a lot of people are watching us on YouTube right now, but you know, you've said it, Tiffany, we can't keep doing this type of work and handle all the other responsibilities that we have in modern society. Obviously, everybody needs money. So if people want this type of information to keep coming, and it's not just you and I, it's everyone who's operating on YouTube who, if you as a viewer have trust in that person and like the information that they're bringing forward, you really should get onto their Patreon, send them money through Super Chat. Ooh, I almost forgot to mention, we're doing a simulcast right now on Tiffany's YouTube channel. People can watch this broadcast right now as well, and you can access Super Chat for Tiffany on Tiffany's YouTube channel. So just go to YouTube and type in Tiffany FitzHenry and you'll pop up right away, correct?
Yeah, you should. I've never done that before, so check it out. Hopefully it'll all be working. I think it's set up to work.
We are getting a huge slowdown, really unusual slowdown on the internet right now. I don't know why that's happening.
I know. I have been having, since I posted that Ellen article, the tech issues have been just out of control. They've been actually just silly and ridiculous.
There you are. Author Tiffany FitzHenry is the title. So yeah, we're live now on your channel, as well as Crowdsource the Truth and Crowdsource the Truth 2. People who want to use Super Chat can do that. Oh, we've got 313 people watching on Tiffany's channel. That's great. Welcome to everybody on the Tiffany FitzHenry YouTube channel. And if you're seeing Crowdsource the Truth for the first time, this is another great way that people can help. We recognize that there's some people who are on a fixed income and can't afford to support other YouTube channels or whatever, and you could share this material around. Don't just rely on YouTube and the algorithm pushing it out there. Actively email this to people, and you know, if you see a video, whether it's this one or another one that Tiffany does or that I do or that somebody else does that you think is important. I mean, when I saw this Trayvon hoax movie created by Joel Gilbert, I want everybody to see that, because it really breaks down the insidious tactics that were used to literally pit American against American. I mean, and remember, Tiffany, this was at a point where race relations in America were maybe the best they had ever been. I mean, we had the first black president. Everybody was kind of like, you know, getting along, and then that happened, and we had, you know, Ferguson and Hands Up, Don't Shoot, and all these fights between Black Lives Matter and Antifa. And it's all about this, like, creating, you know, getting everybody on a side and then making those sides fight.
Which, when you start to see that it's been manufactured, what is that? It's a crime against humanity at the highest level. These are our societies. These are our communities. And you're actively and willfully shredding them and tearing them apart. And what is that worth to us? And at what point do we fight back? At what point? You know, and the way that we fight back really is by just loving each other and going, this is all a hoax. I'm not, you know, I don't ever encounter, I live in the South, and I don't encounter people with racist attitudes. I don't encounter that. That doesn't, it's a fiction in a way that, you know, you can see it's really being created. But when we start to have proof that it's been manufactured,
right,
I mean, what is that really? What is that? I don't know. I kind of think that that's a crime against humanity and people need to pay for that.
Absolutely, and it's also straight out of the playbook of Saul Alinsky, the Marxist leftist lunatic who Hillary Clinton was friends with and who Barack Obama said, when he said he's a community organizer, everybody thought he was like, setting up baseball games at the church picnic or something like that. But he's talking about
Yeah.
Alinsky tactics and Marxist tactics. So it's a very troubling development that we've gotten this far, and so many people don't even realize it yet. So, Tiffany, I think you're doing an amazing job of raising people's awareness, and your first-hand experiences inside the belly of the beast. You had much different experiences than I did as a writer. You're already more highly placed in terms of what executives, like you said, they want you to craft the stories. You're obviously a very attractive woman, and you've told us about the weird experiences you had with people trying to get you to do things in hotel rooms. So you've got a lot of insights that most people never have, and I got to thank you so much for sharing those with everyone. I definitely want to promote your Patreon channel once again. You do an exclusive podcast that is only available to people who sponsor you on Patreon. And it really is a very small amount of money that people can dedicate to these things, $1 or $2 a month. And it's the type of thing that most people will not even notice, particularly when you think about how much a cup of coffee costs, or if you go to the movies and buy a vat of popcorn. This is a much lower cost investment, and you're getting access to information that could change your life, could change your outlook on the world.
Yeah, and two, it's about what we support. And I always say, feed what you want to grow and starve what you want to die.
Right.
So if we start starving these cabal puppets and we start starving these cabal companies and people like George Clooney, who spends his life feeding the eye, we start starving him out and we start feeding what we want to grow, which is people who aren't controlled. That's how we change the world. It's really how we change the world. And not everybody's going to come out like I have to lead the charge. I'm being activated, I say, by God to do what I'm doing. There's no other way to really rationalize walking away from the opportunities that I've had and the place I've earned, and then also putting myself at personal risk, which people say they pray for me constantly. This was not my plan. This was not part of my life plan at all. People don't just wake up one day and say they want to take a big risk and they want to come out against these powerful people. But in order for us to get where we want to go, we all have to be feeding, not the eye, right? We all have to be feeding this new system that we want to build. And just people just listening. I mean, and I do put everything out free and open, all my blogs, all that information's out there. And so my Patreon is just really for those people that want to take that extra step and say, I really want to support what you're doing.
Right.
But I share everything completely open. And, I'm tweeting all day, trying to help everybody stay informed. Mm-hmm. And, to really build something new, to build a studio, to build a streaming platform, to be making movies. I want to direct my first movie soon. These are things that aren't free, and these are things that I want to work with people to create. And I think that the future is so bright, though, because I think everybody's really there mentally, and where we're all going to be just helping each other build what we want to build for each other.
Absolutely. And Suzanne is telling us in all caps, George Clooney is a mediocre actor. So that's a good point for us to reiterate for everybody. Tiffany, I really want to thank you for everything that you're doing, and thank you for joining me today for this late afternoon broadcast. I hope that people will go to patreon.com/Tiffany FitzHenry and support Tiffany, listen to her podcasts, share this information, educate yourself about what's going on. Because as Tiffany said, once you open your eyes and see what's happening, you're not going to be able to unsee it. And just like somebody who has quit smoking cigarettes and can't stand to be around them, you're going to learn to detest the fake news, the fake entertainment, the fake people. And that's what we need. We got to just sort of do it one by one. Anything else you'd like to say, Tiffany, before we wish everybody a good weekend?
No, I just want everybody to have a great weekend, to have fun with their friends and family, and love. I mean, that's the best and biggest weapon that we have, is just to love each other.
Yeah.
Because that's when we really defeat them. Because all they want is division. So love is like the number one weapon.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Such a good message. Tiffany, it's so great to have you on the show, and I want to thank everybody for watching. Have a great weekend. Tiffany, I'll see you soon. Take care, everybody.